So I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready to. And go ahead. Do I take roll with myself? Yes, I'm here.
No, we'll establish for the record, we have a quorum of 3 committee members, and you can go to the first item.
Okay, thank you. So the first item is, it is an action and discussion item. It's the new district facility plan amendment.
So I'll just kick us off. We have 2 new district facility plans for your consideration for approval, one for Harlan Independent and one for Scott County. If you'll remember what we do as we're approving this, we're approving that they follow the appropriate process, and staff recommends approval, the commissioner and staff recommend approval because in both the cases for Harlan Independent and Scott County Schools, they have followed the appropriate processes, convened their local planning committee, voted appropriately, and we're ready to bring them. And if we think about it in the context of the presentation we just had, what this does is this will then establish their unmet need and then have them considered for funding from SFCC if they choose to pursue that path. So that it's important, this is their strategic planning document for their facilities. So we recommend approval.
And so the whole point here is that they're just in compliance with the process.
Right,
Okay.
that's what they do.
Alrighty, so I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
For clarification, is your motion on, there's 2.
I'm sorry, this is for Harlan County.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Harlan Independent.
Harlan Independent.
So is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the item B is district facility plan amendments for Breathitt County School District.
So do we need to have
We
it
need
also
Scott
approved
County,
for
right?
Scott County?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they have to be done separately? Is that what you
Yes.
just said?
Well, since we just did one, let's just do the
Yeah.
second one.
Okay, so the, I'll entertain a motion for approving the DFP for Scott County.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Pretty aggressive plan they've got there.
For Scott County?
Mhm.
They're a very growing district.
Mm-hmm.
That's where
Lots of needs.
Toyota is.
Mm-hmm.
They're always doing something, yeah.
So, great. So item B, you want to take that?
Yeah, so,
A2,
We did it, didn't we?
no, we did A1. A2 is Breathitt County.
yeah, so that's
Mhm.
that's
Right.
Well,
what
it's
are.
B here,
Okay, it's, let me see, what is it called? Okay, well, the next item.
okay.
the next, whatever's
A2.
next.
So the next item on the agenda is to approve a district facility plan amendment for Breathitt County. Again, we're doing the same process, we're making sure they have followed the appropriate process, and we recommend approval, but we're happy to answer any questions that you might have about Breathitt County.
And obviously, they're still under.
They're still under
correct?
state management.
What are they amending? It looks like they've trimmed it back somewhat. Is that right?
They are actually going to, go ahead,
The major change is Sebastian Middle School.
they're going to turn it into an elementary school.
Mhm.
It had been listed as transition, it's now going to go permanent because they moved the kids that were in the middle school into the high school, which is no longer capacity.
Mhm.
So remember,
Mhm.
like Breathitt County actually is here today doing
Yes.
a report to the Operational Management Committee as well.
Right.
They moved the middle school kids in with the high school kids. That seems to be going very, very well. So now they're taking the middle school, it's going to become the elementary school. And then later on, I think they say in their plan, they may consider a new elementary school as
Mhm.
well. So they're just doing some
Yeah.
shifting around.
Mhm.
But to do so, that makes Marie Roberts King
Mhm.
a transitional facility because you can't propose a new facility unless you replace it.
Okay.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
That's much of what Donna talked about.
Mhm. And that transitional notation is important when they do that. We don't let more funds be expended on that
Right.
because they're planning on either getting rid of it or, so we make sure that when they designate as transitional, they're aware that designation means you're not gonna spend money on it unless it's for a safety issue that
Right.
has to be done. So Breathitt County has met all the requirements of the amended GFP and staff would recommend approval.
All right, so I will entertain a motion for Breathitt County.
I'll so move, we approve.
I will second that.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the next one is for Martin County, McCreary County, and Southgate Independent. And can we, no?
Tax rates.
Did I miss one?
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, no, you're right. We're going into tax rates now.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I'm just
That's okay.
going on to the next.
Greg was looking at me like, we have more DFPs.
Yeah,
No,
than
no, I'm
Martin
sorry,
McCreary.
I'm just,
Well,
I
we
didn't
have
go
to-
for
We're good. Oh, he said we're fussing with Martin County, so.
Oh, really?
So I'll turn my chair over.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you.
Come on up, Jay. So the next agenda item is to approve the 2018-19 local district tax rates, and it is for McCreary, Martin, and Southgate. We're chipping away at this. You know, we brought before the committee the last couple of times we've had it. We're now down to, this is 3 more, so we have 1 that's left. It's still outstanding, and just for your information, that's Graves County. And Graves County is actually, they had a petition filed in response to the tax that they were trying to levy. And that petition is now being litigated because there's some, they're trying to determine if the wording on the petition is valid. So.
This wasn't a nickel tax?
This was a
This
nickel
was a
tax.
nickel
It is a
tax.
nickel tax.
Mhm. But, so they're actually disputing the language on the petition itself.
Okay.
That would cause the voters to vote one way or another. But in the interim, what they do is, because it's February, you know, so it's February, so they've gone ahead and billed at the 4%. And then we'll wait and see what happens with the outcome of the petition itself. So that was more about Graves County. They're not up for consideration today, but they're the only one left. The other 3, we are requesting your approval.
Okay, are there any other questions about that for Robin? And if not, I'll entertain a motion. Or, Rich, you want a little bit of time?
It's for, what, Martin, McCreary, and Southgate
Mhm.
Independent?
Yeah, it's this 3 that, right there.
I'll move we approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So, now these are review items.
And this is just a total sidebar while we're
Yeah.
in here and sitting in front of the full board, but can I get a copy of the manual, actually,
The planning manual?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Because I do think, and I didn't want to delve further in
Yeah.
from the entire board.
Yeah.
But with regards to right to work, I
Mhm.
still feel like the language needs to be reflected in that document, not per se
Okay.
how has it impacted,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
things going forward. I think there should be.
So that was your
language
question, not
Correct.
about
And I
whether
just-
the
Right, if we're
results.
seeing any
Okay.
change.
You're talking about right to work or prevailing wage?
Yeah, I'm just talking about the right to work passage and package prevailing wage. I think some of the language is probably,
Outdated.
in conflict
Okay.
with where we are as a
Okay.
state now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because the prevailing wage is already,
Yeah,
incorporated, right?
I'm just curious, we haven't seen any real impact from prevailing wage elimination, is that right? It's not measurable yet.
well, I think there is probably a
Mhm.
project or 2,
Mhm.
but overall, we haven't seen.
Right.
And again, we think it's just too early to really
I wonder if
see what
anybody's
the
come back and
financial
rebid
impact.
anything.
Well, when it was getting ready to be passed, we actually had some districts that were kind of holding off to see what would happen.
Really? Yeah.
And so I think those were the ones right after
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
that where they thought it was gonna come in at a certain rate and it did come in a little lower. So it wasn't, so I think that did happen in a couple of cases. If you're trying to look at it in the aggregate, I think it's still probably too early to tell
Yeah.
what
There
the,
wasn't anybody that went back and re-advertised, so that had gotten bids and said, well, we're
I don't-
really not
I
happy with this, we're gonna
don't-
go back again.
you know, I don't think so, because, I don't know if there was anybody that had gotten the bids. You know, the bids would have said they were good for so many days, and then if they hadn't executed contracts, I guess there could have been somebody that had fallen into that little piece and said, we're gonna start all over. But that's a pretty time-consuming process in
Right.
and of
Yeah.
itself, so
It
they
is.
probably said, we don't know that we're gonna save enough by starting all over. you know, because they still have to follow all the bid laws and all that.
Well,
so.
unfortunately, I think so many times in so many of these districts, you probably have people that aren't necessarily qualified to be doing what they're doing on that front. Would be
You
my
know,
guess.
We
Just
talk,
guessing though.
we talk about that frequently
Yeah.
because,
It's a complicated process.
when we talk about the level of the
Mhm.
professionals in the district, I think they all try to do a good
Oh,
job.
sure,
Their-
absolutely.
You know, their facility directors really try to do a
Mhm.
very good job. But, you know, we really only have 2 districts that have that level of architect, engineer,
Correct.
professional people that are on staff full-time.
Right,
So that leaves the other 171
Mm-hmm.
with either trying to contract out for that service to get that level of expertise or trying to manage themselves
Mm-hmm. Right.
through their local planning committee and, you know, people that are willing to step forward and help. So I think many districts would agree with that
Mhm.
statement that they sometimes do not feel like they have the qualified staff. To be
Right.
able to really negotiate hard and,
mm-hmm.
you know, make sure they're getting the best deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was curious about that because the local districts are paying so much of any new construction, but it's very regulated by the processes of the legislature, you know, of the state.
Right?
And they don't have issue with that, even though they're bearing the brunt of the.
I wouldn't say they don't have an issue with it. I think depending on who you ask,
Mhm.
you may.
They're
get
always gonna have an
varying
issue with
degrees.
speed. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, that's right.
And that is the biggest complaint,
Yeah.
I will tell you.
Change orders
It's
as well.
the speed of which it gets through our approval processes, which is why we went to a tiering approach for a lot of our projects. It
Mhm.
used to be whether you were building a brand new facility and it was gonna cost, you know, $18 million versus working on a field house at, you know, $5,000, it went through the same process. And so last year, we said, this doesn't make sense as far as the use of our staff
Mhm.
or the amount. Now, they still have to follow everything. They still have to do everything exactly as it is, but they're not waiting on us to punch something that says we reviewed it and approved it. So if somebody ever comes back and audits it, you still have to follow everything,
Right.
right? But the hope was to then get those, and it was all based upon risk,
Mhm.
you know, and what kind of money that was really going into it. Obviously, if there's more state funds in it, we're more interested in it.
Right.
If there's more local funds in it, then we should be less interested and trust the districts to do what they're supposed
Right,
to do.
since it's their money. they
So
have
we
the
started that new process in April, and,
Really, that recently?
yeah, and so
Wow.
as Donna said at our board, at the full board meeting, we've sent out a survey to the districts to see if that's helped. You know, because the number one thing they complain about, and even though I have 4 staff that work very, very hard.
Right.
You know,
There's a
you
lot of
see the
districts.
level, you see the level and the amount of things that come across their desk, it's just a
Mhm.
lot for anybody to do. So
Mhm.
that was in hoping to kind of free them up too.
Yeah, and I was also surprised that the state has about, at least my adding between the new money and the old money was about $2 billion of bonding backing for, did you come up with that number? I had no idea, that was brand new to me. So that, and in those cases, when we're doing that, how much control do we have over what is done with that money?
Well, again, I mean, the districts follow the
Just
planning
the, so the
manual.
plan is really the
Yeah.
oversight.
And the other thing is, we don't have people, we don't have the staff to
Mhm.
send people out to really monitor the project, right?
Mhm.
We just don't have that.
Right,
So we rely upon the locals to do that.
Okay.
And back to your point
Mhm.
about, do they really have the staff there that really have the skill and expertise to do
The
it?
answer I can tell you is
Yeah.
an affirmative. They do not have the
they
expertise.
do not,
But
okay,
in most, I mean, now you're bigger, you go
Yeah.
Jefferson County or,
Sure.
you know,
Right.
Fayette County.
okay,
But you're also gonna see, I think, you know, I worry about things just during these projects, inventory control. You know, I mean,
Mhm.
let's face it,
Yep.
we know that's gonna be a huge problem. So there's
Building
lots
materials.
of,
Building materials.
absolutely, there's gonna be
Shrinkage.
lots of, you know, problems on that front. And
It's all that practical, you know,
Mhm.
day-to-day stuff.
Exactly.
That somebody has to be watching and
Mhm.
monitoring.
right.
But,
Okay, and I guess, and I don't know if we have enough time, but I did want to ask about the KFICS.
Uh-huh. So KFIX is our Kentucky Facility Inventory Classification System. We were appropriated $2 million in the last budget cycle, not the one we're in, but the one before that, to build a system. And the goal of the legislature is to try to come up with an inventory, and we're building an inventory based upon characteristics, standardization, so we're trying to keep it standardized across all districts. They go in and populate information, and trying to compare apples to apples as much as we can. It also creates that inventory so that they can use it as far as planning for new facilities, renovations. There's a lot of other really cool modules to this system, but really our charge was to create an inventory that would rank all the buildings. So we'd have number one as the very worst building, school building in the Commonwealth of Kentucky all the way down. We have about 1,400 buildings that need to be put in there. We have about almost 550, 560 that are in process, I would say. I wouldn't say they're complete. And the thing that is the challenge is getting districts to do it.
Right.
So it's time consuming, number one. We would argue if they invest this time on the front end, they're gonna create something very, very powerful for them on the back end. It'll save them time on their DFP, because a lot of the information they're loading in there is used to populate the DFP. And so there's,
So when was it implemented? When did it start?
well, it starts,
Just 2 years ago, or?
yeah, it hasn't even really about, our first report to the General Assembly was October of 17.
And you had $2 million to work with. Is that money gone, or is
Yes,
it?
we've spent that. We have launched the system, we built the system with all the things that it was an off the shelf, and then we've customized it a little bit. And the balance of the time, we've been going out and trying to get districts to put this information in. We front-loaded a lot of the information off their DFPs to kind of help them get started.
So is it because it's time consuming
It's
that they
time,
don't want to?
it's time
And it's
consuming.
new.
And it's new. That's a fair statement.
Yeah.
It's new.
You know how it is when you have to learn something new.
Yeah, and it takes some time, because we want to know down to pretty minute level, like how old is your HVAC, when did it get put in, and, so we can say it's got a useful life, but how long, when should it be replaced?
But again, it's information these facility managers should
Yes,
have,
yes.
so it's kind of, I have a hard
And it
time
should
with.
help them also be more strategic in their planning of
Right.
what they need, and even work orders.
Right.
How they can manage their work orders.
Well, and you can get into predictive replacement too.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
You really is what you need to do instead of react.
yes.
Well, and that's what they're supposed to be doing through
That's what
these
they're supposed
DFPs.
Yeah.
Let's face it, we're looking at.
Yeah,
But-
and some of the DFP, I mean, you can
You
see
can-
on there
right.
the bits and pieces, but we are required to report back to the General Assembly in October of this year. And, I've tried to tell districts, I really don't want you to be on the naughty list that you haven't done this, because eventually, I guess the goal would be, then the General Assembly uses this list to really strategically place their funding.
Right.
So, I mean, we don't have funding for everybody, only a certain percentage of it's gonna get funded by the state. So, what you want to go down the list and knock off the very worst.
Right. Will it ultimately be integrated with the school report card? There's so many nice tabs. It's like kind of awesome. I love it.
This is the new school report card? Mm-hmm.
And, but this, what do you call it?
KFIX.
Will that, that could be helpful.
It could be helpful. We don't have a way to integrate those two systems right now, so that it would automatically. I guess we could think about a link.
Yeah.
I think for our school report card and the discussions we're having right now is trying to really focus exactly what needs to be on there, because of course we're working with an outside vendor, and every time you want to add something, they want to charge you for it.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever happened, by the way, Robin, with that school down in Knott County? That private contracted facility. I haven't heard anything about that for the
Well-
last year, really.
I went to a mediation on that on last Monday,
Uh-huh.
and we left the mediation in the same place we started the mediation, so
Oh.
it was not very successful,
Now,
unfortunately.
is it occupied now?
It is occupied. Franklin Circuit Court, the judge there, ruled that the school should remain open, relying upon a statute that references it as a settlement school in Kentucky. And so, kids are still there. They have made significant progress on the roof, which was our main concern there, even though we have some other concerns. But they've made significant progress on getting the roof, repaired. And hopeful that they will be able to have a certificate of occupancy for that portion. They've not been allowed to use that for quite a while now. So that will be really good news. No matter what happens
Right.
with the outcome, it'll be good that that roof is repaired for the safety of the kids there.
Mhm.
So
I'd hate to think what happens if we got a snow load on that roof. I mean,
we were concerned about that, but again, they've done a good job in trying to repair that.
Yeah.
So I think we'll get there.
And regarding Tracy's question during the presentation about sources of funding
Mhm.
for, now, I know you've explained this to me multiple times, about how funding comes into the district, and then after that, you don't really know how it's dispersed. But the question she had was, how can we find out all the sources of funding, including those, private things, booster clubs and local money by school, not by district.
So, I don't remember her question. So her question was,
Well,
About the local centers and whether, is this the A1 question?
Yeah.
Whether or not we can see on the state report card
Yeah.
and under ESSA, kind of the funding that is spent on local centers. And Robin and I spoke briefly about that, and I don't know if we have a final answer yet, but it's likely no, because they're not schools and categorized in the system like a classic school would. Rather, they're running programs where maybe kids
Like a
from the high school are
departmental
coming
mess at the
over,
school. Mhm.
doing 1 hour, 2 hours
Yeah.
a day, and then going back to their homes.
And they're appropriated just the funds from their home school for that FTE calculation they do for the
Yeah,
time
so-
they spend at CTC, right?
so the district receives the locally operated money,
Mhm.
and the way those kids for the CTCs, and Charlie can jump in here too, but, because they only go for an hour or 2
Right.
hours or whatever, everything kind of tracks back to their home school,
Right.
their primary enrollment school.
And the district kind of just
So-
picks up the cost of the
Yeah,
CTC.
so it could get captured in there at that
Mhm.
school, but it doesn't come out as a per pupil spending amount for the CTC, like as
It's
a
just-
school.
it's included, I
Yeah.
understand, I mean, a certain percentage of that is
Yeah.
including their seat money in essence too, as well as like for
So-
that.
So then to back up from that a little bit, a broader question, will the school report card reflect all sources of funding by school, not
Uh-huh.
district?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but if a district is operating a CTC,
We're
you're not
not
gonna
going to-
see the
got it.
It'll be under their home
CTC
school in
as a
essence,
school.
it's just
Okay,
absorbed
thank you.
cost.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
it'll be
Mhm.
included, but it just won't be over here in this.
So
Just-
is 17-18 data up? Did we? I don't
Financial
Yeah.
data? No.
I think I saw
no.
that would be spring, right?
Yes,
Sometime in
it'll be
spring.
spring.
Because all audits are in by October 30th?
Yeah.
It'll be reviewed right now.
Yeah, they're being reviewed right now. So in the spring, we will post all that for after we get everything audited.
Right.
And it'll be posted on the per school.
Okay, and is that the schedule as it's going to be every year then? So every spring we can
Yes.
look?
So it used to be that it was all posted at the same
Mhm.
time, but we were posting unaudited information.
Mhm.
So when like the test scores were posted in October-ish, we were posting unaudited financial information. So we said, it makes more sense for us to post audited financial information. So they'll still post theirs in the fall, and we'll post the financials in the spring.
And that's consistent with what the federal government guidance is too.
Right.
Financial, and I also wanted to mention, I'm back here, I just kind of snuck in behind Robin.
I'm glad you're here.
But, you mentioned the boosters. if boosters, most booster clubs funds do not flow through the school. So those funds would not be
They're separate.
on any kind of financial statement for that school, because they're separate. And there are some weird instances, I think someone mentioned Franklin County, it might be the boosters actually are part of the school, and they might flow through, but generally, booster club funds will not
Okay,
be.
so how are we gathering the per school information on sources of funding? Because that, we have to rely on them,
Well,
right?
again, this is for a booster, it's a third party.
I'm not talking about boosters, I'm talking about local tax rates or any grants and other funding,
Well, what
whatever.
you'll have, and that's one thing, as Robin, I think, discussed with you all, last meeting, Robin, that we have the revenue and expenses by school now.
Right,
Right, and so that will be updated each year too, but we envision having a link for the report card that you can go look at each.
But
school.
yes, what you're saying is the data being presented has been audited
Yeah.
by a certified
Right.
auditor for the
Right.
school's books,
Yes.
saying, yes, those numbers are accurate for each of those schools.
Right.
And those sources of funding are accurate. But they're
Yeah.
still providing it,
Yeah.
those other sources that you guys aren't actually,
because you guys have no really oversight of any, I mean, you're just gonna rely on their reported data. Because the funds don't flow through you, that, I mean, you know what funds do flow through you,
Yeah,
it's
but,
been audited
Right,
by
but
an
it's been
approved auditor.
audited.
right.
So, yeah, that's what we rely
Yeah.
upon, because their audited financial statement will have.
And I think that's what,
report.
last meeting, I was concerned because I said, could you say, hey, Uncle Tom's gonna do the audit,
Yeah.
in Breath County? Well, no, so I was
State
happy to
audit
know there's,
committee.
there's very much, it's very regulated, very
Yes, very
controlled,
regulated.
so you have to actually be,
There would be
So-
yes, so there is some legitimacy to the,
Are we late?
So I'm really enjoying our conversation. I just want to make sure that we get to the last agenda.
Okay,
item.
yes.
Yeah, and I'll
Sure.
just,
Which
the
is-
other two committees have wrapped up, we do have a few more minutes, so we
So
should.
they're
waiting on
us.
Take time, but,
Okay,
Oh,
So-
gosh, yes, sorry.
yeah, so,
Well, you
yeah,
take
so
it.
the next one is just kind of a review item. Remember, we talked about how we're trying to do a preview for you all before we take the next item to
Yes.
the full board. So, and I guess I will ask some kind of like leading questions for you all to think about, because between now and the next board meeting, we would appreciate your help as board members of this committee to help us make sure that we're framing the next discussion for the full board. So we talked a little bit about the capital plan, and in the materials today, Matt, we've already talked about this at the board meeting, but as I said in the original board meeting, there's a couple of places that we really focus on when it comes to capital plan, and that's Kentucky School for the Blind,
Mhm.
Kentucky School for the Deaf, and the FFA camp.
I didn't know we had that.
You didn't know we had
Right.
that?
The FFA camp,
Yeah, Leadership Training Academy in Martinsburg.
I did not know.
That's part of us. Yep. So, and we were really fortunate a couple bienniums ago to get money for some pretty substantial projects at KSB and KSD. So we're building a new elementary school at KSD.
Mhm.
It's almost done. In fact, probably March or April,
First building built there in what?
20 years.
Yeah.
So we'll be asking for board members to come and, celebrate that we have a new elementary school. It's a really cool looking school. And has been built fairly quickly.
About
So,
a year, wasn't it?
yeah, it's been a little over a year. So, and the folks there are really, really excited about it. And we're doing a major renovation also at Hauser Hall at KSB. It's also to support students, dorm, independent living, all that kind of stuff. It's almost done as well. So we're waiting on furniture for both of those places, and we'll have kids in there. So come next fall, or even this summer, we'll have kids in those buildings. But the things that I would encourage us to think about as we do our capital planning request for the next time, both these campuses sort of have some things that overarching they're in need of. It's not that we need to expand these campuses. It's more about if we're gonna have kids there, it's taking care of what we have. And so one thing that I would encourage us to think about is maybe some pool projects for like roofs or HVACs that could really, we could be flexible about which building, we don't say which one, we just say we want a pool and we'll use it for roofs or HVAC systems. So maybe thinking in that direction a little bit more. I'm kind of flying through here because I know we're on it.
I'm sorry, I,
But we'll need your help, and maybe even when we have the other meeting that we were talking about, Kathy, maybe we can talk a little bit about, capital as well. But we will actually be in front of the state board, also building the biennial budget request. We will start that in April for them. We'll do like a little preview on the building the biennial budget request. So that's
Okay.
our big budget, right?
Right.
So, what the department gets appropriated, the vast majority of that goes out to local school districts, whether it's grants or SEEK or, we have 3 appropriations, so the vast majority of that, we typically start with a base budget. And then as we roll along, we'll do presentations at every board meeting through October, which then will ask the board to approve the full budget before we submit it for consideration by the governor.
Okay.
And then the governor is the one that actually says, I want this in, I want that out, and we roll from there. But we'll try to keep you all a meeting ahead. We're a little out of sync for this one
right.
because on the capital thing, but the next one, we'll get into more meat on the actual budget request itself for this committee.
So is there anything that you want us to do in between now and then?
One of the things always, when you are having your board discussions, we do this and you all can help us in this way. If you hear something, some new priority or initiative, like this morning, we heard about CTE, right? And we heard about a task force and trying to, thinking about how that could be funded differently. So what we do is we listen,
Okay.
we write CTE down,
Okay.
budget requests. So anything that you all hear or as you all talk as board members, if it's gonna have a budgetary impact, the sooner that we know about it, that helps us prepare and do cost estimates and, really refine our numbers. And then anything that would help us shape how you want, like, a program or project to roll out, do you wanna pull in teachers? Well, that has a cost. Do we want to pay them stipends? Do we want to, whatever it is, we're trying to sharpen our pencil to come up with the cost that it might be so that we can then request that amount of money. And we got really good people that do that. Karen and Charlie kind of help with that part, and we do it across the department. So if you all kind of listen with us, and then that helps us as we come back to the finance committee and say, we heard this, or this is a board priority, and we can kind of chunk it out.
Okay, so I just wondered if they, if Robin's right, we've never had finance committee before, and we want to bring the whole board into the process. And based on, your experience, what advice would you have about how we do this for, I don't know how to, she's asking me, and I'm asking you. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, here's how you run it. Just kidding. So, I'm getting educated today, and it was very valuable for me to get here early and sit in on the other meeting and listen, because it helped me a lot know what your processes are. I want to go back and absorb some of this information that you've provided. Honestly, I'm impressed already with the way everybody's trying to move it forward and looking at areas like the K-Fix thing from a small business standpoint. I'm like, efficiency is what it's all about, and that's extremely efficient. Once you get all those schools on board, that's gonna be awesome. I wish they would do it sooner, and I know what they're going through. It's always so hard to get started on something that's new. But once they do it, you'll have them keeping it up.
It
I
will.
promise.
As we've traveled to co-ops, we've tried to not talk about, we need to get this done. We've tried to talk about, here's how it's gonna save you time and effort and energy later. If they'll just invest a little bit of time up front to put the information in, it will pay off for them dividends. And we're right now looking for like the district poster child that can go up and stand in front of a video and say, I did it. Yeah, it was painful, but look what I'm doing with it now.
There you go.
So we're trying
Who
to
would that
get,
be?
I don't know, I'm trying to find that. I'm trying to find that district right now.
Maybe also that carrot you mentioned, that it's
Yeah.
gonna help the legislators when they have all that data, when they look at funding, because that's gonna be my key. If you're telling me that my funding is going to be affected, yeah, I'm gonna jump in and get it done,
Yeah.
so you can see.
Move we adjourn.
Yeah,
So,
second.
All in favor? Okay, so,
So the only things that we have to take back for board approval are
Are
the
the things right now, I'm
DFPs,
Sure it is, but.
new
Yeah, she's
amended
got
and
it.
the tax rate.
The three actions.
Yeah, the three action items.
right,
I can't remember how big it is.
but thanks for all that other information,
Okay.
that's really great.
And Kathy, do you want me to send you a meeting request for that? I mean, do you want me to just confirm our meeting
Yeah,
at
that'd
this
be
time?
awesome.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, and these, I mean, you're so welcome to come, this is completely offline.
It's about a financial
Oh,
efficiency.
yeah, to get different things.
Yeah, this one.
A financial efficiency score.
The
That could be
result-
motivating.
Seriously, I mean, what's the result they get?